Hey there, quick question. What do your coffee, your bagel, your donut, and your favorite pod machine all have in common? They're not competitors. They're not even close. They're all owned by the same family, and you've probably never heard their name. So who are they? How does one family end up owning half the coffee shop menu without anyone noticing? Why would they want to stay invisible? And here's the part that gets uncomfortable. What are they hiding? And why did they have to hire a historian to dig it up themselves? In this video, we're breaking down exactly how this family built one of the most invisible empires in the world, why they've spent $50 billion staying anonymous, and the dark history they eventually had to admit to publicly. Let's get into it. This story starts almost 200 years ago, in Germany. In the 1820s, a businessman named Johann Adam Benckiser started a chemical company. A chemist named Ludwig Reimann joined the business, married into the family, and eventually took it over. For generations, this was just a regular industrial chemical company, nothing special. Then, in the 1950s, a man named Albert Reimann Jr. took charge and made one decision that changed everything. He pushed the company into consumer goods. Not chemicals people never see, products people buy every single day. That decision is the seed of the empire we're about to walk through. Let's call this Section 1. What do they actually own? The holding company is called JAB, short for Joe. A. Benckiser. It's privately owned, based in Luxembourg, and controlled by descendants of Albert Reimann Jr. Here's the list. Peet's Coffee, Caribou Coffee, Stumptown, Intelligentsia, Panera Bread, Krispy Kreme, Einstein Bros Bagels, Burgers Bagels, Pret a Manger, Espresso House, Insomnia Cookies, and through Jacobs Dow Egberts, brands like Jacobs, Sensio, Tassimo, Kenko, and Dow Egberts itself, some of the biggest coffee names in Europe. On top of that, they were the driving force behind combining Keurig and Dr. Pepper Snapple into one company, Keurig Dr. Pepper. For years, they also held a major stake in the beauty company Coty, the parent of CoverGirl, Clairol, and Marc Jacobs fragrances. Now, I want to be careful here because the title of this video says, half of what you buy. And that's a hook, not a literal statistic. This family doesn't own half of all consumer spending. But if you narrow it down to coffee shops, coffee pods, and casual bakery cafe chains, their reach in that specific lane is genuinely staggering. And most people have zero idea these different brands report to the same owner. And that brings us to the part of this story JAB's own corporate website conveniently leaves out. I'll get to that in a minute, but first, you need to understand how they built this without anyone noticing. Section 2. How do you spend $50 billion and stay a secret? First, they never took the parent company public. JAB itself isn't traded on any stock exchange. You can't buy a share of JAB the way you can buy Starbucks stock. That alone keeps them out of the headlines that follow public companies. Second, the family doesn't run any of these brands day to day. They hired professional managers, most famously a longtime partner named Peter Half, to make the actual business decisions. The Reimann heirs are shareholders, not executives. No press conferences, no earnings calls, no public face. Third, and maybe most importantly, reporting consistently describes a family culture built around staying out of the spotlight entirely. Not flashy, not visible, just quietly buying category after category. Since 2014 alone, JAB has spent an estimated $50 billion acquiring coffee, bakery, and consumer brands. That kind of spending, from a public company, would be front-page financial news for a week. From JAB? Most people found out by accident. Okay, here's the part of the story that changes everything. And it's the reason this family's name is not just quiet, it's actively guarded. In 2019, a German newspaper published something the family had actually commissioned themselves. Back in 2014, the Reimann heirs hired a historian from the University of Munich to investigate their own family's past. What he found was ugly. Albert Reimann Sr. and Albert Reimann Jr., the men who built this company in the 1930s and 40s, were early, enthusiastic supporters of the Nazi Party. In 1937, Reimann Jr. wrote directly to the head of the SS, describing the family business as, in his words, a purely Aryan company loyal to Nazi race ideology. During the war, their factories used forced labor, Russian civilians and French prisoners of war. By 1943, forced laborers made up close to a third of their entire workforce. Reports describe conditions that were brutal, including direct mistreatment by the family itself, not just distant corporate negligence. When the family made this public in 2019, they didn't try to spin it. Company leadership called their own ancestors' actions disgusting and said, quote, they belonged in prison. They donated 10 million euros to charity and later created a foundation, named after a Jewish man named Alfred Landecker, to fund Holocaust research and remembrance. Here's the twist that makes this even stranger. Reporting from the New York Times suggests the mother of today's controlling heirs may have been the granddaughter of that same Alfred Landecker, a Jewish man deported during the Holocaust whose ultimate fate was never confirmed. The family that hid a Nazi past may also be descended, generations later, from one of its victims. So where does that leave things today? Here's the part most videos on this topic miss. This empire isn't static, and it isn't only growing. As of the last couple of years, the family has actually been selling down major positions, including a large chunk of their stake in Keurig Dr. Pepper. And their coffee business is being folded into new ownership structures as part of a deal expected to close in 2026. Net worth estimates for the family have also varied wildly, depending on who's counting and when. Anywhere from around $10 billion to over $20 billion, depending on the year and the source. That matters because the real story here isn't one secret family controls the world forever. It's that an entire category of everyday brands can be quietly consolidated and just as quietly restructured without the average customer ever knowing who is on the other side of the counter. So back to where we started. Your coffee, your bagel, your donut. On the surface, three completely different brands making their own choices. Underneath, one family's investment vehicle, built over 2 centuries, funded partly by a past they had to be forced to confront, and today, quietly being restructured all over again. It's not really about one shadowy family secretly running your life. It's about how easy it is for ownership to hide in plain sight. As long as nobody asks who actually owns the label. If this is the kind of thing that makes you want to check the fine print on every brand you buy, good. That's the goal. I've got a few other families like this on my list. One that might own the shoes on your feet, and one that might own the car in your driveway. Let me know in the comments which one I should dig into next. If you learned something, hit like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.